20 years from 1998 to 2017, the United States had 1.1% of the world's share of mass public shooters and 1.8% of the mass public shooting murders. Both are significantly less than the U.S.'s 4.6% share of the world population. People don't take into account that the United States has over 330 million people. You can't compare it to a country with 5 million or even Germany with 80 million without adjusting for the different sizes in population. Many of these countries with much higher mass public shooting rates and deaths have very strict gun control laws. The third fact is 94% of the mass public shootings occur in places where civilians are banned from having firearms. We've heard many times today about the Buffalo mass murderer earlier this year. If you read his manifesto, he spends a great deal of time, like many of these killers do, explaining why he picked the target that he did. I'll read it to you. His manifesto says, quote, attacking in a weapon-restricted area may decrease the chance of civilian backlash. Schools, courts, or other areas where concealed carry are outlawed or prohibited may be good areas of attack. Areas with strict gun control laws are also great places for attack. I can give you quotes from one manifesto after another, from one diary after another, and they're on our website at crimeresearch.org, where these killers, time after time, tell you, but the media ignores the fact, never reports this part of what's in their manifestos. The fourth fact I'd like to get across is the most vulnerable people in our society benefit the most from owning guns. If my research convinces me of anything, there are two groups of people who benefit the most from being able to go and protect themselves. One are the people who are most likely victims of violent crime. That's overwhelmingly poor blacks who...
Can you hear me now? Ooh, what's that? Why is that echoing? I can hear you.
You can hear me.
Yeah, now I'm trying to figure out why there's this great big echoey thing going on.
You've got a reverb going.
That's what it sounds like, but everything turned off. Testing. Yeah, that sounds like a reverb, but where is it coming from? Because everything is turned off on my reverbs. FX mute. Nope, I can still see it. I can still hear it. Well, this is the sucky thing. I hate these things.
I can still hear you. So I'm trying a new setup as well. I've added an external microphone to my phone so that I don't have to hold the thing up to my... It's pretty clear? Okay. It's a bit of a shotgun mic, so it might pick up... Can you hear that? Okay, so that'll help a lot better. That means I don't have to hold my phone right up to my face the whole time. There it is.
Welcome to the Liberty Mindset. Come and explore some of the ideas and issues facing our liberty. 2022 is an election year. As libertarians, we ask that you consider voting in the Liberty Mindset. Welcome, and thank you for your time.
Hashtag stay strapped. That's what I think. So I through this whole thing, the only response that when people say, "What is your response?" I said the only appropriate response is, "I will not comply." Period. Um, my child has standard capacity magazines that exceed 10 rounds for his 22 long rifle AR pistol. So to say that that his gun is automatically not allowed to be carried for any purpose is just kind of stupid, because he's like 6. He can't fight somebody if they decide to fight him. He has to have a gun to win against any attacker that's not 6 years old and weaker than him. So to I mean the entire point of this was to disarm people. They stated it in in the defense that the point was to disarm people because they felt that the disarming was required for to reduce the public risk of mass shooting. And the problem with that is that it doesn't actually produce the desired result. They admitted it. Every person who had testimony on the subject admitted it, and it just doesn't meet the standard. So one of the things I've got access to the opinion letter that's going around the internet. It is, if you're concerned about that and want to figure that out, it's Arnold v. Brown. The order on motion for preliminary injunction is the one that I found. Firearms Policy Coalition decided to put that up on their Twitter several times over. Somebody else had found it as well. There's a possibility that I may publish that on setoregonfree.com, but I'm probably not going to, like, this week. So it won't be there today. But if you wanted to follow along, that's a good place to do it. Now, when you're reading this, there's parts of this that are in the margins, as it were, and they are listed under what's the word I'm looking for? As side notes, notation. Yeah, the notations. So while you're reading it, when you see a side note, a notation, go read the notation in line with that, because what he's doing is he's trying to include everything but allow for brevity. So people who aren't as well versed will benefit from going and reading the line, see the notation, go find the notation, read the notation, and go back to where it happened again. It can be done seamlessly at that point. When I do this, when I read this, that's what I was doing, is I was looking at the notation. The reason is because it throws in things here, and here's a good example under Article 1, Section 27 analysis, which happens to be page 11. As pointed out by the defendants, the Oregon Constitution has, quote, content independent of that of federal Constitution, close quote. State v. Soriano, and then there's a whole bunch of numbers which I don't quite understand what those are, probably line numbers and things like that, and it's tagged with a 3. And if you continue reading where it says there's the 3 at the bottom of the page, while this court disagrees with some of the factual conclusions of U.S. District Court Judge Karen Immergut, which are not binding on Oregon state courts, she is analyzing the measure under the Second Amendment jurisprudence. This court does not reach that analysis since there is a clear preliminary showing that the measure is unconstitutional under Oregon Constitution Article 1, Section 27, by reading the provision and Oregon jurisprudence related to the constitutional protection provided to the citizens of Oregon to, quote, bear arms for the defense of themselves and the state, close quote. If you don't know this and you just skip past that, you're missing a chunk of the information. So as I'm talking about this, I'm going to add some of this information in there. If you're following along, that's kind of what you should know about what I'm saying. It's not me. I mean, I'm going to editorialize, but I'm not going to editorialize on everything. Some of what is in here is already handled by previous court cases. State v. Kessler is a good example. We aren't just jumping into this saying, oh, it's unconstitutional, without having already determined that there's quite a number of things that are unconstitutional about it. The entirety of Measure 114 was unconstitutional, period. Federal and state, period. The reason is because it provides a difficulty in our capacity to keep and bear arms. If we have to ask permission for that, we can't exercise it, and that causes a problem. Well, uh, not only that, the AG of California uh, decided to put their hat in the ring in another case in Texas, saying that that it was similar on that allowed people to sue for over abortions in Texas, and they said that was unconstitutional, which means that now they've got a letter saying that this particular type of law is unconstitutional, signed by the Attorney General, who is now trying to defend the same type of law. And that's the real reason they got caught with this, between this rock and a hard place of their own creation, and they either have to withdraw their letter, which they can't because they, like 24 other AGs signed it or something like to that effect, which means that everybody would have to withdraw it. And then they would have to figure out some way of erasing the past, because nobody's going to forget that. and they got called out on it. And at that point, that's when the AG said, I can't defend this anymore. It's just, we screwed up. My favorite part of this opinion letter is actually in about, let's see, I'm on page 17 under public safety, and it specifically talks about what the defendants conceded the ballot measure's intention was about. I'm going to read this, a good portion of it. See, public safety. President Barack Obama eulogized to the Sandy Hook families in Newton, Connecticut a decade ago. The court echoes, quote, I am very mindful that mere words cannot match the depths of your sorrow, nor can they heal your wounded hearts, close quote. The court is incapable of improving on that important, profound sentiment. The defendants concede the ballot measure's intention is to reduce mass shootings. Mr. Marshall, for the defendants, is right that mass shootings deliver a special type of terror in our heart and minds, and that the majority of voters in Oregon believe that banning large-capacity magazines would help relieve a, quote, grave and immediate risk to the health, safety, and well-being of the citizens of the state, close quote, in ballot measure 114 preamble. The facts do not support their conclusion. Quote, judges must not be intimidated into upholding majority rule. Close quote. Edward Tromke, A Natural Tension, February and March of 2002. Quote, judicial independence and judicial accountability are both shields and swords, but both are intended to protect judges to allow them to fairly decide all cases and ultimately protect the rights of every person, close quote. Oregon Constitution allows for reasonable restrictions to promote public safety. The promotion of public safety cannot be based on a merely speculative harm. He goes on to discuss the factual finding number 17 in this opinion, and goes through some information like 1 in 1 million chance of a person being being a fatality in a mass shooting, and that large capacity magazines were used in 3 of every 10,000 incidents of self-defense outside the home. We don't know. He also states we don't know what the statistics are for inside the home because those aren't reported. So the fact that they made a statement, they provided no evidence, and now they cannot support the statement is a significant problem in this judge's eyes, because you have to be able to support the statement. And what he basically said in this is that the sample size was too low. There aren't enough mass shootings with large capacity magazines to actually produce any sort of actual evidence that meets the statement that they used. And that by itself is enough of a reason to say that the magazine ban in particular is unconstitutional. He also goes farther to say that it does not reasonably promote public safety, meaning not a permissible legislative regulation. Therefore, it is facially unconstitutional prior to analyzing how unduly burdensome the measure is on firearm ownership. Magazine size is a regulation on a firearm. That regulation must reasonably promote public safety. Large capacity magazine prohibition has not been shown to promote public safety in a calculatable way beyond the protection already achieved by the status quo. The court cannot read Ballot Measure 114, Section 11 in any way that creates a constitutional act. So not only is he saying that it's unconstitutional, he's saying that there's no possible way that it can be considered constitutional in any way, shape, or form, because It just isn't constitutional. He continues on with being unduly burdensome, and I'm not going to. I mean, we'll come back to this statement over and over again. My preferred carry gun is a Kimber 1911. I purchased it for the express purpose of making sure that I had a factory gun with factory magazine, and went through all the background checks and everything to prove that I could, in fact, carry a gun. I also carry concealed. I have a license to do so. I have received permission from the king to put my coat on over my gun. That gun is an 8-round magazine, and you carry an extra one in the chamber. So there's a total of 9 rounds on that gun. I have a number, I won't say how many, of magazines that carry at least 10 rounds for that gun. Every single magazine for that gun has a removable base plate because that's how they had to assemble the magazine. It was not they were not capable of assembling putting the follower and spring into the magazine without removing the bottom of every single magazine. This is also how you maintain the magazine. If you don't maintain the magazine, you go to the range a couple of times and it gets gummed up to the point where it's no longer reliable. Now you have to go buy a new magazine. Magazines cost kind of a ridiculous amount of money, especially when you increase the demand for them by making it so that you can't maintain them. Those magazines, which are now between, if you get a crappy one, $20 and say $60, would now be between 60 and 100, maybe 200, because they can't make enough of them because they had to change the tooling to make it so that they couldn't be taken apart. Every single one of them, because you can remove the base plate, every single one of them now can be modified to hold more than 10 rounds, which means every single gun that Kimber makes has a magazine that's modifiable for over 10 rounds, which means none of them qualify. And every time that they produce a new gun, they either have to change the magazine to the point where nobody can do anything of it, or do anything with it, or they have to make it in such a way that it's maintainable. And therein lied the problem with Section 11 of 114. It actually stated in there that you cannot have a magazine that could possibly ever hold more than 10 rounds. And every magazine on the market for just about every single gun, including shotguns with tube-fed magazines, qualified. In the last month or two, this new shotgun round, which is only like an 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches, is flooded the market with a gun that could hold 15 of them. If your shotgun will cycle these, every shotgun with a tube magazine that holds typically 5 to 7 rounds now holds anywhere from 10 to 15 or more, which means every single shotgun on the market that can cycle these things is now prohibited because they have a magazine, even though it's fixed, that fails the test of Bout Measure 114, Section 11. The reason that this really gets into it is because it was so burdensome, so unconstitutional, and so burdensome on the right to keep and bear arms at the state level. We haven't even talked about the federal level, which is a little, theoretically a little looser. But at the state level, it was so burdensome that it couldn't be considered constitutional. Well, I don't think it's Oregonians that did this. I think this is imports. So we've had over the last, I'm going to say 20 years, a pretty significant influx of people who have come up from California. The Yeah, and I understand that, and I'm not saying it's all of them, but well, and it's not always the reason that they left. So let me give you some examples. HP, Intel, and a couple of other chip manufacturers exist here. They pulled talent from Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley thinks that these are good laws because they grew up with them. Because in the Mulford Act happened in the 1960s, and they don't know any better. They also don't have in the California Constitution a defined right to keep and bear arms in the California Constitution, and this is actually stated in this opinion um, right at the beginning that um, that California that this the defense was actually prepared for California legislation, and that it didn't work because of it. So, um, like I said, if you really want to hear about this, you should go and get it and read the entire thing. I read the entire thing. My child last night wanted me to read to him, and I told him it was going to be boring. He listened to about half of it as he was going to sleep. But even he was saying, "Well, that doesn't make any sense." He's 6. A 6-year-old says this doesn't make any sense, and agrees with the judge. Just to put that out there. Okay, so what I think has happened is that we have people who think that these laws are okay, that think that these are the way things are because they only have their echo chamber set up in a way that allows them to hear the same things over and over again. I think that they've moved themselves from California and New York into Oregon because they had job opportunities, and the job opportunities were moved. Like Bend is a pretty good example. There have been a lot of tech jobs that have happened in Bend, and because Oregon has been historically behind the 8 ball. I mean, we didn't have computers in classrooms in the mid 1990s, even though there was a massive requirement for people to have computers in the job in the job industry at that point in time. At high school, we had 3 in like the library, and you had to book like 15-minute blocks to use it. We didn't have widespread internet in most of Oregon. We only had it in the big cities. And when I was going to in the early 2000s, when I returned to Oregon after horrible events of my life had happened, I had to take, never mind the fact that I could have taught the class, I had to take a CS 120, 141 or something like that, computer science, some sort of, so I could learn how to turn on a computer and use it in enough of a way that they could say that I was proficient with a computer. Never mind the fact that at that point I was building them because I recognized that I was going to have to do that. We have this is what happened is that our education system could not support the technology systems and technology companies that we were recruiting and giving benefit tax breaks to, and as a result we had to pull talent in from other places. As a result of pulling talent in from other places, these people think that these laws are okay because they haven't ever experienced having anything except those kind of laws, and they don't understand that if everyone has a gun, then it doesn't matter who has a gun. They don't understand the concept. They've never been exposed to that. In the meantime, we've, fight off coyotes just to keep our barbecues in Eastern Oregon, where I grew up. Just to keep our barbecues safe, we carry guns around because we're out in the middle of nowhere, and there is no cop that's going to come and save us from that coyote. There's no cop that's going to save us from Uncle Drunk. There's no cop that's going to save us from anything. So we carry, even as kids, we had access to guns all the time. Thurston was a huge shock to us in Oregon, which Thurston is one of the two mass shootings in Oregon that have been referenced. Thurston was a huge shock to us in Oregon because over in Umatilla County in Pendleton, nobody would ever thought of such a thing because everybody had a gun. There were 30 or 40 guns in the parking lot every single day at school. You could see them. They were hanging from racks in the back window. And nobody locked their doors. Everybody knew how to get to the ammunition. We didn't have mass shootings. We had ample means and opportunity to do so, but there was no mass shootings in Podunk, Pendleton. Why is that? Well, number one, when we would go out, we would see the destructive power, and even if our friends didn't have guns, they knew somebody who had one and had gone out shooting, and everybody knew the destructive power of a gun. It wasn't something that was what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't something that was aggrandized in any fashion. The Thurston thing, and I probably have a lot more information than I should. My first wife knew the parents of the shooter at Thurston, had taken um, a Spanish class from his mother, who was at Springfield High, and was just you couldn't get her away from the TV that day. When that went down, she called in sick. She stood in front of that TV all day long and didn't do anything. Her brain was just completely aghast that it would have happened. And then we learned that he had a thing for the new Romeo and Juliet, with Leo DiCaprio in it, where they changed all the swords and daggers were guns with the name Sword and Dagger, and he had romanticized this idea to the point where he was unstable as an individual. And his parents were trying to address that by giving him a little bit of shock therapy, but they didn't know how because they were not gun enthusiasts. And he got the guns out of and I remember they were like rinky-dink guns. They were 22 long rifle type stuff. It wasn't like he had a whole bunch of ARs at the time. This was pistols and rifles that were low caliber, and it was just an issue for him because he wanted so badly to have this romanticized vision, but he didn't know how to wrap his head around it, and his family didn't know how to wrap their heads around it either. So when that happens, what do you do? I mean, there's really no way you can fight that. With my child, when I took him out for shooting the first time, we used the range we went to had steel, and I take quart and half between quart and half gallon like milk jugs, and I fill them full of water, and I put a couple of drops of food coloring in them. And even with a 22 long rifle, they tend to explode at that size. So it's very, very easy to see how the bullet interacts with the water and interacts with the bottle, and how much damage it can do. So at age, I think he was 3 the first time. He was either 3 or 4 the first time I took him shooting. At that age, he understood that those were incredibly dangerous, and he knows exactly what safety measures he needs to have. He'll be 7 next month, but he doesn't go around trying to grab guns and point them at people. He understands the difference between toys and real. He understands the safety that needs to happen. I grew up with guns. That's how we did things. But not everybody grows up with guns, and as a result, they're all behind the 8 ball when that happens. I think it's important to note that one of the reasons that I'm specifically addressing, that this order specifically is addressing just the MAC ban, is because their section, I think they said section 12 or 13, required severability for everything. So even though every single piece is unconstitutional, and we know it's unconstitutional in its entirety, we have to go and argue every single section, one section at a time, and determine that every single section of ballot measure 114 is unconstitutional. And they just happened to start with the magazine ban because that one was the one that was preventing people from getting properly armed. Well, let me get to the conclusion here. The conclusion. Let me read the conclusion out here. The court orders the temporary restraining order remains on ballot measure 114, sections 1 through 10. Upon receipt of notice from the defendants, which that would be the state of Oregon, the quote unquote permit to purchase process is administratively ready. The court will hold a preliminary injunction hearing within 10 days, unless fixed by the court on a different date, to determine if the program can constitutionally be implemented. So before I continue, let me state what that means. What that means is that the state, because they don't have a way to administratively handle the permit to purchase system that's outlined under 1 through 10, they have to create that before the temporary injunction, the temporary restraining order will be lifted. And then within 10 days, or unless, and he left it open in case the court can't get to it in 10 days, there will be a preliminary injunction hearing to determine if the program can be constitutionally implemented. So if the state never gets it figured out, that TRO stays. It is It is as permanent as the state makes it. If they never get it figured out, and we know the state is not very good with their technology, if they never get it figured out how they're going to do this, that stays unusable and ineffectual forever. Let me continue. The next hearing related to background checks will be on December 23rd at 10 a.m., as noted above. The identified statutory provisions of the law subject to that review will be filed by the defendants in writing by December 16th at noon. So they gave them until yesterday at noon to file, and I think this is specifically dealing with the quote unquote Charleston loophole, which is that 3-day. If they don't respond in 3 days, you don't have to keep the FFL can release. I think that's what it is, but it may be that they're saying, well, the background check system is just completely foobarred, and we don't want to try to let anybody have their guns right now, because there were like 40,000 people in that queue, or between 30 and 40,000 people in the queue at the last time I looked. And whether or not people can continue to sell guns. So it's one of those two things, and it might be both. But the Charleston loophole is the idea that 3 days was enough time to do the entirety of the background check, and that if you had, and this is back in the day when the feds were the only ones doing it. It wasn't just the state; it was the feds. It was to prevent some ATF flunky or FBI flunky from just saying, "No, we're not going to finish this this background check because we don't want you to have a gun, and if we just don't finish it, you can never have it." And it's not really a loophole. What it is it's a check and balance to a bureaucracy that could post facto deny you your rights by just not doing their job. So if the government does their job, it's not an issue. There's no issue there. The problem is the government thinks they need to do their job more than they need to do their job, and they delay people. And that's the problem. So it was supposed to say and take that 3-day and turn it into a 10-day in the ballot measure 114. I think that's what they're talking about, but it could be that they're just talking about maintaining the status quo and allowing people to get their background checks done and buy their guns. It could go either way. I don't know. Maybe it'll go that way. Maybe they'll just start setting things up to the point where the whole thing just kind of goes down because they stall too long. And then the last part of this, the court orders a preliminary injunction is granted as to ballot measure 114, section 11. That's the magazine ban. Preliminary injunction is granted against the magazine ban until a full hearing on the complaint can be heard, where the court can determine by clear and convincing evidence whether ballot measure 114, section 11 is constitutional under Article 1, section 27. And by reading the whole thing, we already know that the state is going to have one heck of a time proving that, period. Their best proofs have been more than questioned. They've been thrown out as unconstitutional. Well, I'm gonna note that he also mentioned in here that Lewis and Clark had a repeating rifle when they came to Oregon to begin with. So the idea that repeating rifles are not a thing that can be protected, that and we're not talking like we're not talking they had like 10, 5 or 10 rounds. We're talking 24 rounds were in that rifle. And that was before Oregon was created as a state. That was as they were exploring the territory. So That's part of this problem, is that people don't understand that we've had things like the puckle gun since before 1776, which is a grenade launcher, a multiple round grenade launcher, just so you're aware of that. We've had the idea that people can't own cannons. No, actually, you can own cannons even to this day without permits or background checks. You can have them cast yourself, or you can buy them, and they're not a black market item. They're literally, you can have them if you want them. The goal of our right to keep and bear arms was to be able to prevent animals of both the quadrupedal and bipedal design from doing harm to us as a public in any way, shape, or form, and that includes tyrannical behavior, just like saying you can't own this, or tyrannical behavior saying not only can you not own this, but we're going to take it from you, or tyrannical behavior saying I'm a coyote that wants the hamburger on your grill. It doesn't matter. The point of arms is to be able to defend ourselves. That includes all bearable arms, not just guns. That means you should be able to have a sword in a cane or an umbrella or whatever, because that's an arm that's bearable if you know how to use it.